Hello to you all once again, and welcome to FiST Chat, the vodcast that covers topics related to film, science and technology. My name is Ben Warner and I'm joined again by Stephen Kern. How you doing there, Steve? How's it going?
Hello everyone out there in FiST Chat land.
Oh, fantastic to see you again, and I'm sure we're all good to see. We're going to get into an interesting topic today in sci-fi films that get the science right. Now, we had a bit of a joke at the end of last week's vodcast where we said there weren't too many of those of late, but in actually doing some of the research for this episode, we discovered there's actually quite a few films that have actually done a decent job of it. So if we launch straight into it, we'll start with perhaps one of the most obvious ones. That's 2001: A Space Odyssey, directed by Stanley Kubrick. And that was in collaboration with famous science fiction writer Arthur C. Clarke. And between the two of them, they really put in a concerted effort to make sure that the science was really right in that film. So just one of the things, if we go through point by point, the concept of gravity is not usually depicted too well in sci-fi films. But Steve, could you maybe describe how they did that right in 2001?
Well, they did it with the visually stunning scenes of the space station spinning. I mean, it's fantastic. It's real, science, and you've got to remember that Arthur C. Clarke and other great writers like him at the time, like people like Isaac Asimov, they were actually basing their stories on what they knew, the very little they knew, and they were extending that into science fiction. And that's why so many of the things they wrote about actually are right. They weren't trying to make things up. They were using science as best they could to create another world.
Yeah. I mean, another example of what they did so well was this idea of no sound in space. Most people that have watched sci-fi films will know that they get this wrong all the time. You get your rumbling spaceship or your explosions or whatever. And 2001 is one of those few films where they actually had extended sequences in space where it was totally silent. So do you think they did that well? And I mean, I know that other films will put the sounds in for dramatic purposes, but do you think it was good for this film?
Oh, look, I think it was fantastic. As you say, those long periods of silence on the spaceship, probably exactly what it would be like in those sorts of things. Interestingly, though, you talk about no sound in space. Alien, which is actually not too bad a film in terms of science, in space no one can hear you scream. Yet you can hear the mothership Nostromo blowing up. I don't know how far away from the pod as Ripley makes her escape. So.
Oh, well, that's all about the dramatics, isn't it? They have to take some license with that sort of thing, I guess. But Alien is good in other ways. Like, for example, there's the life cycle of the alien itself. Now, even though it's sped up a bit too ridiculously in the film, the idea of it, of how it changes from start to finish, is something that's found in nature, isn't it?
Yeah, actually, that was very good. I mean, the alien itself as an adult doesn't probably quite stack up the way it's put together. But I agree with you. The life cycle and is an excellent feature, and that's probably what we might expect. I mean, there are a lot of creatures on this planet with life cycles not dissimilar to the alien.
Yeah, and another thing that they did quite well was they introduced that idea of suspended animation for space travel as well. You've got the astronauts waking up, at the beginning of the film after a long journey, and that's realistically how a lot of us would do it, unless they figured out some way to do the Star Trek thing and go at warp speed or something.
Well, the interesting thing is, I'm not sure if we actually know when Alien is set, but the characters are all very, very realistic. They're exactly the sort of people that I imagine that you're going to see mining asteroids in space in 30 or 40 years.
Yeah, absolutely. So changing tact, another film that is quite good was Contact, and that had obviously was based on the book by Carl Sagan, and a lot of what makes that work, maybe just on a concept level, is that instead of this idea of us actually physically meeting aliens either on Earth or us traveling to some other planet, we actually discover them through radio signals, which is I guess a believable concept in that it would travel faster than we could travel, and it's conceivable that we could probably be in contact with aliens in this respect.
Well, I think it's interesting you say, when you talk about who wrote it, Carl Sagan, are we seeing a pattern here that the best films produced are actually produced by very good writers, and people who took the science that they were writing about very seriously? They weren't making these films just for some explosions in outer space. They were making these films so that we could experience what it might be like if we were those people out in space.
Yeah, absolutely. And a lot of them have, most of them have got either science research behind them or they're actual scientists, aren't they? So, and that's, I guess, what science fiction works best, when it can really put a lot of that realism into the stories and such.
Well, it's quite interesting you say that, because one film where it worked backwards was Sunshine by Danny Boyle. And they already had the script, about the sun going out, which is completely implausible, really, in the way that they said it would go out. And, in the next 50 years or whatever. And they actually got in touch with Brian Cox and the team at CERN and had them come up with what can only be described in good old colloquial terms as a cockamamie, scientific explanation as to why the sun would go out, and as to why then these guys on a ship could restart the sun, a couple of nuclear weapons or something. Ridiculous, but reverse engineered, scientifically plausible. If you listen to the commentary on the DVD, Brian Cox will justify everything.
Well, as long as it can be justified, I guess. All right, let's have a look at some other ones. Deep Impact is actually another one that popped up when I was doing the research for this, and a lot of it has got to do with, I think, especially when you compare it with the fact that it also came out at the same time as completely, well, to me, stupid film in Armageddon, both about, asteroid impacts on Earth, whereas Deep Impact seemed to take a more somber and realistic kind of tone. And apparently quite a few things in there, like the idea of the shuttle people going up to the comet to try and blow it up. Apparently it would be impossible to land on something like that, and they've actually duplicated that in the film, in the sense that they tether themselves to the comet instead of landing on it, and all things like that.
Yeah, well, I mean, they're two examples. I mean, both of them, well, one's an extremely dodgy film, which is Armageddon. But you're right, Deep Impact did have some aspects that were correct, so I guess that's, it certainly gave us a good idea of what's going to happen if a meteorite or comet impacts on the planet. I'll just slip in a shocking film by comparison, which was 2012. So,
oh yeah, of course. I mean, Roland Emmerich doesn't deserve a place on this particular vodcast. We can just keep naming each of the films that he continually breaks the science on.
Exactly, but one I would say that was exaggerated, if we're going along in that vein, a bit like Deep Impact, was exaggerated, but not altogether unreasonable, was The Day After Tomorrow. Mm.
Well, it was probably his best film to date, I think, only in the sense that, yeah, like you said, it's exaggerated, but it really does give you sort of food for thought. You really pause and have a bit of a think about what could happen.
It certainly would help even the most ferocious skeptics at least understand the systems that control climate. But that's another episode 4 of FiST Chat, I think.
Yes, that's right. And just a couple of... There's one that... I mean, all of these are sort of space-based that we've been talking about. Another one is Eternal Sunshine of the Spotless Mind, which is to do with memory.
That's the film, and anyone who watches that film, they would see exactly what Jim Carrey would be like if he wasn't a movie star. It's exactly what his life would be like.
Oh, absolutely.
That's what to do with science. Yeah, I take that back, Jim, but it's true.
I mean, one of the great things about that film is that it really came across this idea that memory is a network of links. That's what it really portrayed quite well. And it did it surprisingly clearly, really, because it really did jump around a lot, as memories were getting erased and all that sort of thing. So that was, it did that really well. That was actually the only one that wasn't space-based that I came across, but I'm sure there's others. But there's also a lot of films where you get like moments here and there where there might be maybe just one little scene or something like that. The most recent Star Trek film, for example, even though that had all the rumbling ships and explosions in space, there was one sequence right at the beginning where a crew member got blasted out of part of the ship, and when she went through the hole in the ship and went out into space, they created this sound effect that sounded like going into a vacuum, and then everything went silent. So I guess that was kind of one of the things that they did to kind of, I guess, maybe highlight that, yes, they would like to have, I guess, put something correct in there, but in the end they had to go with dramatics instead.
Well, it certainly did, and that works for a lot of films.
Yeah, absolutely. But I mean...
I'm sorry, go on.
I was just saying, like, you mentioned before that a lot of these films have had science fiction writers and scientists, infusing the projects. And Star Trek, at least the original series, was also all about that as well, because the creators of that actually sought out leading science fiction writers at the time to contribute to the scripts. And I mean, obviously, it's quite hokey looking at the original series now because it's all kind of plastic and looks like it only was shot on $5 budget. But some of the ideas in that series are actually still quite strong, and I think a large part of that is because of the writers that were brought on board.
Well, that's it. I mean, once again, those sorts of films and television series from that era, there was a lot of excitement about space and what it might be like and being part of the space race. And I think, that's reflected in a lot of the science that is actually accurate and inside those scripts. I mean, the best, according to conspiracy theorists, the best science fiction film of outer space of all was been the moon landing.
Ah, yes. NASA definitely had the budget for that one, didn't they?
Yeah, well, we've all seen Capricorn 1 somehow. Somehow I don't think the conspiracy theorists have got much to go on.
Absolutely. Okay, we'll wrap it up there. That was quite a few films that we went through there, and they're all very good films in their own right. And we can only hope that Hollywood or maybe even independent filmmakers can come up with new films as we go into the future. So
there are agencies that will assist them with good science, and anyway, if there's anyone out there in FiST chat land who wants to tweet us or Facebook us with films they think have got some good science, we'd love to hear about it.
Absolutely. So yeah, that wraps up this week's topic. Thanks again, Steve, for the chat. Now, just looking ahead to next week, we're actually going to be doing a topic that was suggested to us by one of our listeners here. So this is quite exciting. It's going to be called Snake Oil Science, and we'll be posting some links on Facebook and Twitter that provide some background into all of that. So yeah, it'll be great to have a look at that. So yeah, once again, FiST chat, FiSTchat.com. You can look us up there, Facebook, Twitter. We're on iTunes. There's RSS feeds, and you can pretty much get us across any of those things, and we like to put in additional links and information for you. So until next week, we'll catch you then.